All right, folks. Well, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another week of the RecPoker podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Bluffstorini in the home game and at RecPoker Jim on Twitter. And I have the best freaking job in the world talking poker with my friends here on the Strategy Forums edition of the show every Monday night while we steal each other's chips in the Play Money home game. And you can come join us for free. Come get a free membership at RecPoker and take part in the Discord, the forums like we're going to do tonight, the home game, the strategy videos, the RecPoker road trips. I mean, I'm missing a bunch of stuff. We do so much here. A lot of it is free. Not all of it is free. We have a premium membership, which you can join for only $15 a month, and you can get your first month for only $5 by using the code RecPoker at checkout. And one of the perks, aside from all the fantastic training material that we offer here in social activities, is you get to join the RECing Crew here for the forums edition of the podcast. I'm going to introduce you to a couple premium members in just a moment. But first, I have to mention that we're brought to you by Running Aces. They are the official sponsor of the RecPoker podcast, a fantastic casino, card room, and hotel and racetrack located less than an hour north of the Twin Cities in the beautiful state of Minnesota. And you can find out more about them at runaces.com. We really depend on their support and the support of our premium members because, like I say, most of what we do here is free. We're largely volunteer-based organizations. So thank you to Running Aces, and thanks for all of our premium members for your support. Now, they let me host the show on Mondays, but I am just one man, and it takes a group, a gang, a crew to make the magic happen over here. We call this group of wizards the RECing Crew. And if you want to find out more about me and the rest of the RECing Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them right here tonight on the show, starting with the one and only Mark Zhang.
Hey, I'm Mark Zhang, and once a month, the first Thursday, we do my office hours where we talk poker and strategy.
And I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Radman50 just about everywhere. And on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, you can join me for the book study.
It's a lot of fun. I hope folks do dive right in. Folks like new premium member Terry, who's joining the conversation here in the forums edition of the podcast. Terry, say hi to RecPoker Nation.
Hey guys, how's it going? Terry Langdon here from Calgary, Alberta, and just wanted to mention I was just over in Ireland. That's where Jim and I had met. My wife and I had met him and his wife there actually, and all I gotta say is a small world. We actually grew up pretty close to where he lives now, but however, we moved to Calgary about 16 years ago, and we're pretty avid poker players out here, and really looking forward to help build the RecPoker community in Alberta.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's great having you on the team. Looking forward to seeing a lot more of you over the next little while. We're also joined by premium member Lauchlan Swann, who you'll recognize from last week's episode talking about a hand we played in the Australia Poker Open. Lauchlan, just in case folks didn't catch last week's episode, just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about sort of like what you've been up to recently and how you found yourself playing the main event of the Australian Poker Open.
Yeah, so I go by Dingo on the Discord or Swann Poker at Instagram if you want to follow. I recently have started playing poker full time, a lot more serious than just like the pub leagues and playing some series that were close to home. And recently, I played this Australian Poker Open. It was the inaugural one, so the very first one. Fired one bullet into the main, then fired a second one because I was there and didn't do well on the first one. Started running deep, and we end up making the final table, which is really cool. There'll be a hand for that hopefully soon. But yeah, we're in. I think we're going to talk about the hand that I posted where I was in day 2. We're already in the money at this point, which was really exciting.
Yeah, that's great, man. And kudos to Lauchlan for being a RecPoker member for a while now, and using the forums. Lauchlan has been very active in the Discord. He's been sharing his hands with other members. He's been getting feedback. And even though he's, decided to take his game to the next level and play professionally, he's still looking for feedback, looking for help, and finding ways to improve. We're always learning. We're always trying to get better. And so this is going to be a fun episode because Mark is also a professional tournament player. And so we're going to get some really interesting insights from some premium members, some RecPoker Crew members, a couple of playing pros here as we talk about the hand. So this is a hand from day 2 of the Australian Poker Open. And Lauchlan, you were saying that each day 1 played down to 12.5%. So by the time you make it into day 2, you've got a bag, you're already in the money. And they actually roll back the blinds, which is a very common in these multi-day, multi-flight tournaments, so that no one's too short at the start of day 2. In this case, we ended up with some very big chip stacks. And so at the time that this hand takes place, the blinds are 3,000, 6,000 with a 6,000 big blind ante. We're down to 45 remaining, and we're in the money, of course. And the effective stack is the villain with 1.5 million big blinds, which is 1.5 million chips, which is 250 big blinds at this. Yeah, I know, Mark, that would be a lot of big blinds. 250 big blinds is a lot to be playing with day 2 of a tournament like this. And this is the effective stack. So our hero here, our correspondent, Lauchlan, actually has a little over 2 million chips. And so you can imagine we're playing very deep stack poker here on day 2, which is going to be unusual for a lot of the players that find themselves in this position. Lauchlan, is there any other context that you want to provide here? Had you been on this table long? Had you had a chance to make any reads about opponents before we get into the action?
So at this point, I'd been on my table for a fair bit. I was fortunate enough for day 2 not to hit a featured table. I just sat on one table essentially all day. And I was probably in the top 3 or 4 in chips. So the 1.5, the villain in this situation is actually probably top 5 in chips. So it's big stacks playing against each other. They're like, especially with some of the pay jumps coming up, they're starting to get bigger. I think at this time, roughly, it was like 8,000-9,000 or something like that on top of, because when you bagged in day 1, you got 5,000 straight up as well at the end of day 1. So, you're effectively won 13,000 at this point, or just a bit over. So yeah, not like a lot of history per se with the villain previously outside of this tournament, but the villain had been on this table for a fair bit. And they were one of the biggest stacks in the field still now as well. So it's a very interesting spot because I've never been this deep. I like playing big stacks. I find myself with some bigger stacks and deep, maybe 50, 60 bigs, but to be, over nearly 200 bigs at one stage with 45 people remaining was insane. So,
yeah.
It gave me some comfortability because, as I said previously, I like to be aggressive. So I got to play some big pots and put some people in difficult positions because of my stack size, which was, for me, a comfortable feeling because I knew I wasn't at risk if I wanted to shove on someone, which is influenced probably a bit how I play as well, knowing that.
And if you're familiar with our Discord here, you've probably seen Lauchlan posting in the Discord some results and some hands, and also some links to where we could watch him live stream or watch his play be live streamed in some of these tournaments. And yeah, Lauchlan, you have a very exploitative game. It's very based on sort of feel and intuition when it comes to judging your opponents and how strong and weak they are, and you definitely are not afraid to pull the trigger on some big hands and some big plays, and it's worked out really well for you. So good for you. So I'll introduce the cans here, and then if folks want to chime in, feel free to unmute. Mark, just because I don't see your mute signal there. If you want to say anything, just raise your hand, and I'll call on you instead. So here we are. It is day 2, 45 in the money, 3,000, 6,000, 6,000. We're starting with an effective stack of 1.5 million. So it folds to our correspondent, Lauchlan here, in the hijack with 10 of spades, 9 of spades. We open to 2 big blind, and it folds around to the villain who calls from the big blind, closing the action. Now, I have a question. When we're deep like this, does anybody open to a larger sizing than 2 big blinds? Like, I think it's very standard to 2x when you, at this point in tournaments, usually stacks are shorter. You can apply almost as much fold equity pre-flop with a 2x open than you can a 2.5 or a 2 3/4. But when stacks get really deep like this, I find the open size tends to increase a little bit. I guess, Lauchlan, my first question to you would be, was there like a standard open size at the table at this point? And had there been larger openings earlier in the tournament, or how did you arrive at the 2x open sizing?
So at this point, I was always opening 2x, so I wanted to stay consistent regardless of my stack size, especially because the more chips I picked up, I widened my range quite a lot. So while I'm not afraid to play big pots as well, I want to keep it consistent in terms of like what hands I am betting and the sizing of it to keep my buckets together or my range consistent with it. Definitely, I agree. I can go bigger. Just being with this such a unique situation for me because it's my biggest buy and I've played. I'm running the biggest tournament I've played. I just wanted to try and minimize everything. So in a way, I was playing a bit scared as well, but I was not trying to portray that by at least being consistent by just always betting two times. And as I mentioned, the villain's one of the biggest stacks still at this thing. Like there are a lot of smaller stacks on our table, so the 2x is relevant to them. So if one of the smaller stacks called, the big blind's probably priced in to call with such a big stack anyway, but if they had a smaller stack, I don't want them to find a 3-bet shove because of a flat in between positions.
Yep, I like that. And as you point out, and Rob talks about this all the time, we are in an ICM situation now where we're laddering up, I'm sure pretty quickly as players bust out. And, you know, the more ICM pressure you're under, the more you kind of demote action. So big bets become small bets, you know, some calls become folds, some raises become calls. Not always, but that's sort of one of the guidelines of, as there's more ICM pressure, we kind of slide down a couple of rungs there. Okay, fantastic. So we found our first rabbit hole, folks. We spent 5 minutes talking about a 2x open sizing. So there you go. Welcome to the RecPoker podcast. So we get called from our villain. We're playing very, very deep. We're in position. The flop comes king of spades, jack of spades, 6 of hearts, and we're holding 10 of spades, 9 of spades. So we've got the gut shot to the straight flush draw. Any queen gives us a straight, any spade gives us a flush, and we got to be feeling pretty good about our hand at this point. So the villain checks, and they're going to be checking a lot on this board, I think. And now it's up to us. So there's going to be, we open to 2x. So there's 2 from us. There's 2 from the big blind. There's the big blind ante. That's 5, and then the small blind. So there's about 5.5 big blinds in the pot at this point, if my math is correct. And it's king jack 6 two-tone, which to me feels like a dynamic board. I would be c-betting to like a relatively larger sizing here, like 3.5 bigs into 5.5. You go with a very small sizing, 1 big blind. Tell me about that. And then I want to see what the rest of the crew feels like. Because if you told me we're playing deep stack, I'm in position with another stack that I cover, dynamic board, I would be c-betting to a larger sizing in a vacuum. Talk to me about your sizing choice.
So my sizing choice here is actually exploitive on my opponent. So they're incredibly aggressive. A younger Asian player, there's a stereotypical Asian players are kind of aggressive, especially the young ones. I see Mark
smiling in the background. Yeah.
And this particular villain had check raised me quite a lot throughout the day on boards like this when I had weaker hands. And now that I had a very strong combo draw on the flop, I wanted to bet small and call the raise and to try and get piles in if I did complete. So my strategy here is to just call off the check raise because I had a high frequency of them knowing they'll do it, and then reevaluating the turn and river, because my hand strength is actually probably pretty disguised here in terms of how good I did hit this board. Normally, you'd think I've probably hit, like, they've probably hit the king, maybe ace jack or something similar like that. But I feel like 10-9 specifically on spades here has got so much nut potential. I'm down betting my nut potential here rather than just down betting a range.
Yep, that makes sense. Anybody want to weigh in before we move to the next action? All right, so we make the small bet and we just hook, line, and sinker, baby, reel them in. They go for the check raise, which we were hoping for. So they check raise to 6 big blinds, which again isn't that big. Like there's 5.5 in there, 6.5 in there by the time you make your 1 big blind bet. It seems large relative to the bet size, but relative to the pot, you're actually getting a pretty good price here with a lot of your hands, I think, just intuitively looking at it.
I think it's about pot.
Yeah. Oh, is it about pot? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So it's not. Yeah. Yeah. So it is more substantial than I sort of intuitively give it credit for. So I think we want to call here, right? Because we have so much equity in the hand that we can improve on just a ton of turns and rivers, and it also allows our opponent to continue betting on future streets. If we 3-bet here, there's a good chance they're going to shove. That puts us in a difficult position. So I think it sort of feels natural, like a call. Does anybody want to weigh in on any other way of playing it? Doesn't seem like it. Okay. And that's what our hero Lauchlan does, makes the call. So we go to the turn. And the turn is the 8 of diamonds. So we've got king, jack, 6, 8, with 2 spades and a heart and a diamond. So this is actually an interesting hand because now a 7 also brings in a straight for us. So we picked up 4 more outs because we're definitely behind here, I think, is our expectation. Maybe they have some weird, lower straight draw or lower flush draw, but most of the time against this action, we're behind. So when I think about it, I'm thinking about what are our outs to improve, and we're really likely to only improve to a winning hand with a straight or a flush. I think if we hit a 9 or a 10, that's probably not even that good for us. So we're really thinking about our straight and flush outs here. And so the 8 on the turn is a really good card for us because now we can make the low straight or the high straight. So now the villain leads. Well, they don't lead into us. They check raised and we called. So they continue their aggression by betting 13 big blinds into the pot. And that's pretty big. I'm so bad at math. I shouldn't do math live on the air, but that feels like that's got to be like 2/3 or 3/4 pot, which is it's a strong action following the check raise line. We have a choice now. So I think we're never folding. We've got way too much equity to fold here. Obviously, I'm spelling it out. We should consider every option. Mark's like, folding? I don't even know how to spell the word folding. What are you talking about? So the only question is, do we call, do we make a small raise, or do we make a large raise? So before we reveal the action in the hand, Rob or Mark or Terry, does anyone have like a preference or something that you'd be considering here that would lean you towards one of those actions? Doesn't seem like it. Oh yeah, Mark, yeah.
I mean, I just call. There's no reason to raise. Like, he's not folding a better hand. He's not, like, he probably doesn't even have a worse hand than ours. I don't even know which hand is worse than ours.
Right. Yeah, it would be hard. It would be like this,
and we have perfect
7-9 or something. Sorry, I cut you off there, Mark. Say that again.
I said we have perfect visibility, like, to the river. Well, if we hit it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the only thing I'll push back on is, will they fold a better hand than ours? Because I think they could fold a jack here if we raised. I mean, they could obviously, I don't know how they get here with an 8, but I mean, I guess we could get them to fold an 8. We're blocking a lot of the hands we'd like them to have, unfortunately. Sorry, Emma.
So my question would be which hands, like which jack would check raise the flop, or which eight would check raise the flop and bet the turn.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe like a queen jack. Oh, but they can't have spades then. So yeah, that's a good point, because you have to think about, like, as we're narrowing their range, we can't put hands back into their range just because we want them to have them now as on the turn when we eliminated them on the flop.
All of a sudden, by the river, they have deuces.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Here, Rob, did you have something there?
I was just gonna say the 8 doesn't really change anything, does it? From the standpoint of what our opponent has.
Yeah,
The
I don't
8
think for our
really
opponent.
is a it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because it really doesn't. I mean, it doesn't fill anything. It doesn't fill any straights. It doesn't fill any flushes. It just doesn't. It's just a non-hand or a non-card that had really no impact on the hand.
Mhm. Yeah. So I agree. I think the call makes a lot of sense here, and that's what Lauchlan does. We get to the river, and if you could pick one card in the whole deck, if you could just pick one card, it would be the Queen of Spades. And I guess you'd helped enough old ladies across the street that week, Lauchlan, to make it happen, because the poker gods were smiling. Boom, Queen of Spades on the river. So that board is King of Spades, Jack of Spades, 6 of Hearts, 8 of Diamonds, Queen of Spades. We have the 10-9 of Spades. For the nuts, it is the straight flush. And people are saying, oh, well, a bigger straight flush would be 10 ace. But they can't have it because we have the 10 of spades with our 9-10. So we have the actual nuts here, and we've got to be feeling good about it. Now, Mark mentioned visibility, and our opponent, who's taken a very aggressive line up until this point, now that the flush draw comes in, they choose to check the river, and it's our action again. So there's about 30, low 30s big blinds in the pot right now, 32, 33, something like that. And Lauchlan obviously is betting here. He's got the nuts. Before we reveal Lauchlan's action, does anyone have a preference for the bet size here? Thoughts on what are we trying to accomplish? What are the hands that we want to get called by? Anything like that. This is an aggressive opponent, so we should consider, can we get them to bluff raise us? It's going to be, on a flush board like this where there is a straight possible, that tends to, for some players, open up their bluffing range because it's a very scary board. Other players will choose to just play a less volatile style in a case like that. Does anyone want to weigh in? Just checking. All right, so Lauchlan, you choose 33 big blinds, which I'm guessing is a pot size bet here without doing the math live on the air, which is I think that makes a lot of sense. Tell us a little bit about what you were trying to accomplish with that bet.
Yeah, so it pretty much is pot. I'm horrible at maths as
Yeah.
well, so I won't try and do it. I'm pretty sure it's pot, roughly.
Yeah.
So in the previous week, we spoke about how I did a small river block bet. So this is a large block bet, essentially. I'm hoping he somehow has a weird ace-x combo of spades, and he wants to try and get it in. So it's polarizing to look bluffed, but also block and keep a lot of his value. That like one pairs are going to probably fold on this, but I think like two pairs can call as a bluff catcher if they've got like king jack off and stuff like that, just because of how the action has played out with him checking the river. I'm putting him on a stronger hand rather than just one pair checking for value, because I feel like if you had a weak king or weak jack that wanted to check raise on the flop, he wouldn't, like on the 8, he probably doesn't bet as big. So when he goes pot or just over pot, I think on the turn, it makes me think he's like really strong. And obviously there's no full houses here. I would just straight flush obviously beats a full house, but like he's got to at least have minimum like top or like a set. Like he slow played a stronger hand, and then I've obviously riveted him. And this is where I was talking about him being quite aggressive. I know he was capable of blasting big bluffs in, and I was hoping I was to induce it by having a polarizing big bet here. And it kind of just like as I was saying, on the flop and stuff like that, I was betting for the nut range instead of just my normal range because I knew I could get piles in against him if I did succeed in making like a super strong hand here, which we have obviously.
Yeah. And I like the idea of targeting that aggressive player and just like, oh baby, please have the ace of spades and decide to blow me off this hand. You know, like that's gonna happen a non-trivial percentage of the time. And like, you know, they play, I guess the question is, yeah, I don't think they play a lot of their flushes this way because they probably bet the flush on the river, but they might take the nut flush line or the nut flush blocker line with the big check raise there. Let's talk a little bit about, before we get to results, let's talk a little bit about your range here. So I could see, so you're kind of, this action is very consistent with a flush, right? You made the small bet on the flop and called the check raise. You called the turn bet. Now the scare card has come in, like it's completed the flush draw. When they check, it's like if you had a bare ace of spades, this would, you know, you yourself are gonna be bluffing here at some frequency and maybe with some other combos as well, particularly with your image, which we've already talked about as being aggressive. What, and I'm kind of curious, Mark, Terry, Rob, if you have ideas for like other kind of hands that we might choose. Are we bluffing here often? Can we like represent the flush when we don't have it? Are there hands other than like the ace of spades X that we might choose to do that with? Sure, if anyone has any thoughts there. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I don't know which ace of spades combo we have on the river. Like, like you would have to call the turn bet with an offsuit ace,
right?
Try to bluff it on the river because I just don't think you are gonna call ace deuce with an ace of spades just to bluff a river. So like,
right.
I can't even think of many combos that you get here with. So the range is quite value heavy. Like I can't find a bluff. Like,
Yeah,
not
that's
enough.
what I was. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Like, what are the bluff combos here that we can have? And that kind of question really gets down to like, who is our opponent? Is our opponent, because like the worst opponents are just gonna say, oh, he's got a flush and I fold. The slightly better opponents are gonna be, oh, he could have a bluff or he could have a flush, but he could also be bluffing here sometimes, so I should call. And then the even better opponents are gonna be like, well, he could be bluffing here sometimes, but let's go back through the hand and do some hand ranging and see like how many combos of bluffs does he actually have? Not that many. Back to folding. It's like that bell curve meme that you see, right? So we're really targeting those players that are smart enough to know that we can be bluffing, but not so experienced that they can actually go through and do the combos and see that we don't have that many bluff candidates here. And that, as Mark says, kind of like a value heavy range. So should we go to results? Is there anything else we want to talk about here? All right, so brilliantly played, Lauchlan. As you nailed it, the guy tanks. So, you know, a thoughtful player taking their time, doing the math. They reluctantly call and show king 6, which was 2 pair on the flop and was ahead, you know, until the river, definitely. And was playing, you know, their value hand. I think if we put ourselves in our opponent's shoes, we can see the call pre-flop with the very small pre-flop open. That's going to be defending at a really wide range. The check raise on the flop with the value hand of 2 pair. You're still ahead on the turn, so you're leading. And then they've just decided to take this essentially bluff catcher line and check call on the river here. And we get paid with our straight flush. So the question that Lauchlan puts into the forum post that he's prepared for our members here is, wasn't sure on the river sizing, so went bigger, but knowing now he flopped 2 pair, I feel like it might have been able to go even bigger. Wondering how people would have played this run out. So I do think, to respond to your question, this is another one of those polarizing spots, right? Where well, I don't know, maybe we don't have as many bluffs as I thought we did right off the bat, but I feel like we want to be betting big here. I don't know what Mark and Terry and Rob have to say about that, but I do like the bigger sizing. Yeah, Mark, talk to us.
So, well, the first bluffs would be aces, and I just don't think people bluff aces.
Yeah.
Because with ace of spades, that's the only offsuit combo ace, or maybe ace king, but
I thought about ace king maybe, but yeah, it's just very
it
small.
would be, but like, how many people do you actually see bluffing that hand? Like, to them, it has showdown value, which it does not, but whatever. The villain in the hand, he actually made a mistake on the flop. He should not check raise this big, and he should have, especially like the problem with people, like people are so unbalanced in those spots. You're supposed to check call a king 6 and jack 6 and check raise king jack, just because when you are deep, you don't get to realize your equity, or you want to have a hand that can withstand some turn barrels, and those are like really easy calls by the turn, where if they just call the flop, they would have just a weak jack or weak 6, which can get bluffed off. And at the same time, it gives you like the let's say the turn goes check check. Now it gives me the opportunity to go again 2x pot. Like you can't go 2x pot and bluff every time. So you have to have some hands that actually are good for value, or even go for check raise on the river. Like if you play them fast on the flop, you never have those strong hands by the return on the river. So I think you can actually take a lot away from just how the villain should play that hand, especially 200 big blinds deep. Like king 6 will not be a good hand by the river anymore on this board. You need a perfect run out, like a deuce deuce or 4 deuce or 5 deuce, yeah, something like this. But most likely it's gonna like overcast to the 6 will come, or you're getting counterfeited, like it happens to you, or the turn is an ace and then you just throw down again.
Or the flush comes in, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of bad outcomes for that.
Exactly. So it's just I think it's a overplay on the flop.
Yep, I like that. Terry, you unmuted. What's on your mind?
I think sometimes you could just overbet the river there and make it look like an absolute bluff, and the guy can't, the guy just can't fold. Like it looks like you're trying to steal it. I think in a lot of places there where you have the high end of the full house and the guy has the low end of the full house, he just can't fold. He has to call, right? So I think the overbet maybe might get called as well.
Yeah,
I do like the overbet. Yes, we should just be as greedy as possible because people don't bluff enough.
Yeah. And this does feel like one of those spots where they could have a lower flush. They could even have the nut flush. Like there are some targets, some value targets that might call. And that leaves out the kind of sticky player that's like, no, you're bluffing here at some frequency, so I'm just gonna snap you off with 2. Yeah, Lauchlan. So you kind of mentioned that as one of your thoughts here when you say, like, if I'd known he flopped 2 pair, I might have even been able to go bigger. So I wonder, do we think 1 pair calls the pot size bet here? I think they have like top pair if they have like ace king. Are they calling here with the pot size? So we're really targeting those 2 pair combos by sizing up and sets. And I mean, like I said, there's a straight, there are lower flushes. So that is a pretty rich value target for the bigger bet there. I like that.
With how the hand played out, I really discounted my opponent just having a single pair here. It just made no sense to have top pair to check raise, to continue on the turn and then check the river.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think the check raise on the flop really indicates either 2 pair or a set. The fact that the only other hands that you might see there would be like Queen 10, but we're blocking Queen 10, right? We're blocking the straights. We've got a lot of the flushes because we have all of the spades. So there's not a lot of bluff check raises in our opponent's range. So typically they're going to be check raising with the 2-pair or the set combos.
Yep. And some of the other bluff combos that they will have will be those like suited connector, lower flush hands that are also going to be good targets for that overbet here. So I like that point, Rob. That's really smart. All right, well, this has been an education so far. Lauchlan, do you have any other thoughts that you want to share on this hand before we wrap it up and move on to day 3?
It's kind of interesting because obviously the stacks are so deep.
Yeah.
And so it was very unique in a way as well. Obviously understanding the theory here is like super important. So it's really good. Like I can ask these kind of questions to the community and to you guys, because it's not about like showing how I won the hand. It's like understanding how I could have played the hand better if it arises again and comes up again. And I'm looking at it now, and after thinking about it as well, all I'm thinking is, would I have done the same bet with a smaller flush? And I don't think I would have. So maybe the bet is bad because my other value hands don't bet as big. Like obviously we know results oriented, the opponent calls, but maybe on a smaller bet, the villain gets very out of line because obviously they played this hand of kind of out of line in a way as well. They raised the river.
Right. And with a smaller flush, that actually puts you in a much less comfortable position. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I always like to think about the counterfactuals, right? It's like, okay, so we're doing this with this hand, but what does the rest of our range look like? And would we take the same line with the other parts in our hand? And like, if our opponent is really paying attention, what can they learn confidently about our range of hands when we choose, especially some of the like larger or smaller sizings? Because I think a lot of poker people kind of just like don't blink at like 1/3 to 3/4 pot bets. It's just so standard that it's just like it could be anything. But the little alarm bells go off with the tiny bets and the big bets. And so I think, we really have to be careful when we're playing against thoughtful opponents, choosing like what's the range of hands that we use for those bets. So I think that's well said. All right, gang, any other parting thoughts, or should we pat this baby on the butt and roll on out of here? Looks like that's it. So thank you to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for all their support. Check them out at runaces.com. Of course, Mark Zhang, Terry Landon, Lauchlan Swann, and Rob Washam, thanks for your contributions. And you, the listeners at home, we couldn't do it without you. So keep tuning in every week, and we'll be here on the RecPoker Podcast. See you next week, everybody. Good night.